There is no replacement for core software engineering skill sets. In my opinion, right now, I think it's a force multiplier. It's a decision support system. It's a speed enhancer in terms of how you do things faster, which I suspect over time, as this skill set becomes more prevalent, we will see salaries normalize.
And then outside of engineering, a new category emerged. It's not yet captured in market surveys, but I am seeing vibe coding as very real. One example I can give you is marketing and SEO. We all know content can be beautifully created by AI these days.
Your pay absolutely should be tied to that local market some way, somehow. If you're all remote, then it's a question of how competitive do you want to be and where are you making trade-offs? If you don't want to hire anyone in San Francisco, and you can make that decision, but the key thing of that is what you can't do later is come back and say, hey, I tried to hire 5 engineers or product folks in San Francisco and I couldn't afford them. Our pay data is wrong.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ami Parekh, founder and CEO of Stello AI. And today I have with us a very special guest, Nate Young, who is the founder and CEO of paidwell.io. Paidwell helps companies build very scalable compensation programs. And I'm super thrilled because Nate, prior to building his company, was in-house HR with HelloFresh and many top-tier tech companies. He has also been a part of 10 acquisitions, 4 divestitures, and 1 IPO. So very, very unique experience in that. So Nate, welcome. Would love to have you say hello to our audience.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited. I love our conversations, and I will say having the opportunity to kind of record that and share some of those conversations, I think is outstanding. So I'm very excited to be here and learn from you as well.
That's awesome. And today, I'm going to put Nate in a very hot seat and ask him a lot of questions on some of the hardest topics in compensation, which is job architecture and building salary ranges. And this is something that every company has to do. Some do it better than others. But definitely Nate's been there, done it so many times. I'd love to pick on you, Nate, and get some ideas from you. So Nate, maybe we start very basic. What is the salary range? Do companies even need it? Help me understand what we are even going to talk about today.
Yeah. So that question, I think there are levels to it, like a lot of things, right? And what I would say there is that at face value, though, it's what a person could reasonably expect to get paid in a job that is competitive, fair, and I would say takes into account a number of different factors. The other factors, a number of other factors, is where the asterisk is. It could be a long tail of possibilities to consider. But for me, it's really just like, hey, I need to hire a job. What is the range that this person should fall into? How you determine that, what goes into it. There's a bunch that goes into that. But in short, it's just like, what's acceptable? What's okay? What's high? What's low? And I think a lot of times in compensation, a lot of what we do is really initiate structure for measurement, for comparison, right? And that's what a salary range is, which is it gives us something to measure and compare to say, hey, is this high or low? Is this person asking for something high or low? Is it commensurate for their experience and performance? Or are we low to that? Is it because our budget, there's all these things that go into it. It's really like, what's okay, right?
Yeah, that was super helpful, Nate. I think that's absolutely right. So salary ranges is something um, that is the range in which you can pay a job or a role. It's also very location specific. So how you would pay somebody in United States versus Mexico could be very different for the same job. We've also
For
seen an
sure.
extension to it, which is equity refresh ranges, which then becomes a part of your total comp. So in addition to base salary, people also look at equity refresh ranges for companies that offer equity. And then finally, of course, bonus target ranges for the ones that offer bonus programs. So that's super helpful, Nate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
give us like maybe a very high level view on how do companies go about building salary ranges and when should they even start? Do they start at like their first employee? Should they start at 50th? Should they start at 500th?
Yeah. Yeah. So one other thing I will say is even if they don't have a salary range, they still have some kind of basis of comparison. The question here is not when should they do it, because as soon as you go to pay yourself as the 0 to 1, I'm a founder doing something, you immediately start to think about, and I'm sure you've been in the same shoes, how much should I pay myself? Should I pay myself all my revenue? Should I pay myself part of my revenue? Am I making enough revenue to pay myself, right? And I will say, as silly as that might sound, you're having that same conversation whether you have 10 employees, one employee, or 10,000, right? And what you're saying there is, hey, what's acceptable? This is the work I need to get done. How does that compare to the market and or other folks in a similar role? And then finally, like, is it fair? Can we afford it? All this kind of fun stuff, right? There's a lot of complexity that goes into this, but the short thing for me is you should start looking at some kind of reference to say, is this enough or not? Even if it's not the external market. How much I pay myself as a one person thing, maybe how much revenue do I make? I want to pay myself $500,000 a year, but my revenue is at 200K. There's a gap there. You know what I mean? Whatever the case is, I'm making something up. But in short, for me, the first part is you should start considering how to set an acceptable range of pay, whether it's just you or if it's you, governing the pay for 10,000 people. How sophisticated that is, how valid it needs to be, how relevant, how competitive, how affordability, all the things that factor into that scale with complexity. But at one person who just got a round of funding or went out on your own to hang your shingle all the way up to 10,000, 100,000, you should be looking at some kind of salary ranges and acceptable pay from the get-go, from zero, right? How we set those ranges varies, right? And what I like to say here is like there's an analogy I use with some of my customers, which is that we'll say, what's the average pay for this job? And I will go and say, there's an analogy I really like, and that is that the average orbit of the Earth is the sun, right? Because the sun is in the center of the Earth's orbit, right? So meaning the average of where the Earth is at any given time is the sun. If the Earth was ever in the sun, that'd be the worst thing that could ever happen for the Earth and for us on the Earth, right? So really, what this comes down to is what's the median orbit for the sun, right? And this is the difference of how I like to explain this. And the median is not where the Earth is at any given time. It's, hey, where is it usually, right? And if you use that, you can usually get a pretty good handle on, hey, this time of year, right? At this, we're in this, wherever we are in the solar cycle, you name it, the Earth is probably going to be here. 9 times out of 10, you're reasonably close. How close may be very different. And that's the part where I like to talk to people to say, hey, the Earth's orbit only matters if you're on Earth. If you're on Mars, and that's where we go and talk about parameters and all of that. And the taking this analogy closer to home, so it's less esoteric, is that we want to take a look at is what do most software companies pay? What do most software companies pay that have between 50 and 500 employees, or between this much funding and that much funding? Because headcount may not matter. And that's where when you go talk about the information that you're consuming here, I like to refer to something. This is a little nerdy, but I'm a little nerdy. But what I will say here is you want to take that data, turn it into information that a person can understand, inform them to give them wisdom around what's acceptable, right? And then so they can take action. So back to my single person discussion, when you have one person or you have 10,000, right? Hey, what should 10,000 people get paid for in this healthcare system or in this services company or in that distribution company, right? That's where you can start to say, well, what do other companies like us pay, right? And that's where I think how I build my salary ranges is I want to have some acceptable range plus or minus to what I want to be competitive with and what I can afford. And that's usually the two factors I like to consider. And that would be, for example, here, if we have a company that's thinking about its salary ranges, where do you get talent from and where do you lose talent to? Dimension one. Dimension two, how are you funded? Are you private? Are you public? Right? What's your liquidity? How much revenue do you have? All of that. And I call that more of like a burn rate or efficiency metric. And I think the real answer is when you set your salary ranges, it's somewhere in between the two. Because I usually recommend you want to be absolutely as competitive as possible that you can live within your means as a business. And that's really the trick of where you go answer all the questions. And that salary range is set by role, by job, by person, by level, by market, right? So that you can make those trade-offs. And then finally, you have to work backwards from what are we trying to actually accomplish? Because if your affordability can't match the talent you need to succeed, your salary range is maybe some tweaking, or that's where you have to like make trade-offs. But to me, the real thing is what's acceptable for us. It can get really complex. And then finally, this is the last part because we are in a people business, regardless of whether we are tech, healthcare, services, distribution, you name it. We're still people. What will someone accept and what will keep them engaged, meaning that they have a high intent to stay, right? And their discretionary effort, how hard they work and how they perform is high. That's the balance. And that's where I will say a lot of times, I've said a lot here, but I'll say a lot of times in compensation, we use this phrase art and science. It's very much that. The science is the math, the medians, the averages, and all of that, the percentiles, you name it. Industry, headcount, revenue, all the stuff we want to talk about. But also, you can do the best spreadsheet in the world. And if that software engineer you need to hire gets a higher offer somewhere else,
They're gonna
all
go.
of that work is for nothing. So you have to be effective. So that's in short, Those things I like to consider, which is what's acceptable in the market, what can I afford, right? And then what will someone accept and be fulfilled taking over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Nate. And I also like what you say. At the end of the day, you have to make a choice for what can you do and afford and what talent is
Okay.
important. For example, at Uber, you may pay your engineers or product engineers a very different level, or if you're a Facebook or a Netflix. And then if
Okay. Yeah.
you're a company, your priority might be the doctors and the nurses and, some of your innovators on the healthcare side. And, an engineer may be paid very differently than what some of these tech companies pay. There's no right or wrong. It's just that who are you as a business and what do you want to pay for and how do you envision growing? For most of our companies or most of the customers that we work with, it's generally a combination of market data. So they purchase surveys from some of these survey companies. Yeah, there are like 5 or 7 pretty well-known ones. And
Mhm.
then they take a look at their internal data and see, what is my salary range going to be? Somewhere it's a balance of the market data and internal data. Each time you may or may not be able to reach all the way to market data, but there is a good effort. So that's really helpful, Nate. Uh, Nate, these days we are seeing a lot of AI roles emerging. Help me understand or talk to me about how do you think of salary ranges for AI roles? I think market data, some of them have references to these, some don't. Um, yeah, so just talk to me about how would you build ranges for some of these newer roles?
Yeah. This is where we're going to do a little more nuance, and I'll say it depends, right? And I'll say not all AI is created equal, right?
Right.
And there are elements to it in terms of like the underlying factors, like is it really AI? Because I think that's a lot of the people talk about, but it could be machine learning, it could be deep learning, it could be an advanced algorithm, you name it. And then finally, there are also levels to those rules, obviously, right? And that's where I think that with AI having such a big, I'll call it moment right now, the more experienced people who have been in AI 20 years, 15 years, right? Those folks are going to be far and few between, right? Second, their skill set may be fantastic and they have a depth of understanding about AI that no one else is going to have because they've been in it for so long before it was cool, right? They may also have an understanding of AI and its principles and how it's applied that may not be relevant today if most of the AI content is actually being driven by model
Yes.
specific LLMs or something similar, right? And that's the part where there's some trade-offs here around how much are you building, how much are you interpreting or translating, and what do you actually need, right? So one of the things I'm sure you've heard this as well, which is, hey, we're going to build out this new AI function. We got a round of funding, or our company wants to understand how to build this tool for our employees. It's AI driven, something like that. That may not require any developers, right? And that you may be able to buy that off the shelf and configure. Vice versa, if you're building an AI product, that's a very different conversation. And that's where, to me, what you want to think about is what kind of AI talent do you need? What depth of knowledge, scope, complexity, and all that do they have to have? And is your AI need a product driven? I mean, this is something you sell as a business and it's intrinsic to how you deliver your services or technology. Or is it something you're building for internal teams, right? Or that you are buying or, what configuring, you name it. And that to me is where there's some different structures there, right? But in short, I would say that if I were to talk very broadly about AI talent, it's mostly going to be a subset of software engineering and product management. Of that, I would say for product, do you need them to have understanding of AI, right, or not? Because the product management principles may or may not translate. Second, what risk are you willing to take? If you are only looking for people who already have AI experience, right, then it's going to cost you a penny right now. It's going to cost you more because right now, people who have that skill set are going to have a higher premium in the market. That's just how labor economics works, right? That being said, you can also grow your own talent. You can go hire and move software engineers and have them learn it. And that's where there's some risk reward around, hey, this is the same thing that any company is going to be talking about. Not that we want to commoditize people. What do we build or develop? What do we buy, right? And if you buy it, the same equation comes down for AI talent of every other kind of talent, every product and service in the company in the world. It's driven by economy, time, quality, money. If you need to get good people now, it's going to cost you more. If you're okay taking time to develop and grow someone who may not have the same level of expertise, you can hire a lower level or pay less because people are willing to take a pay cut or not get as much money to learn this skill set because it is a very high demand skill set. What you're doing though, with however you end up doing this, is you're making a trade-off. If you are willing to grow your talent, that means you are developing experience and talent in your team because you may not want to pay them as much or you may not have the budget for it. As soon as they develop that skill set, you're going to have to get ahead of your skis really fast to catch up and pay them,
Right.
or you're going to be a test bed or a growth development center for other companies' AI talent. Right. And that's where, to me, that's where I would just keep this in mind because I would say for me, you want to say, hey, where do we want to be competitive in general? Do we need to do something else for AI? And right now, if you're a company that AI is a core competency for what you're trying to build and how you're building it, you're going to pay a premium. I don't know where that is in the world. And that's where if you need someone who's very, that makes sense. Like if you need someone who's super skilled, you may end up paying the same amount of money where the old school, hey, I'll hire this in a labor arbitrage overseas somewhere. That may not translate as well anymore. And more importantly, you may still lose people. And the whole point of this is to be competitive and make them happy and engaged. So I will say for me right now, I'm thinking that if you're going to be hiring AI talent, you want to be competitive. You may want to set a higher percentile. You may want to set a richer data cut than maybe what you're used to, because a lot of companies right now are scooping up a lot of AI talent. And there may be a lot of, not to speak overly generally here about the US, but like there may have been tech layoffs recently, right? You name it, AI talent is hitting the market. Time to fill in those jobs is still high. The salaries are still high. They're going to be higher than most other software engineer jobs, and most software engineer jobs are higher than other jobs in the market. And you just need to keep that in mind, which if you pay less, it's going to take you more time, and the talent you're going to get is probably not going to have every box checked. If you want to have every box checked and you want to hire that software engineer in 30 days or less, it's going to cost you. You're either going to pay a recruiting agency and or a higher salary, and that's the trade-off you're going to have to do. Setting your salary ranges higher will save you money elsewhere and may save you time, but it's going to cost you money. And
Yeah.
that's that. Pick two levers and pull them, right? Is what I would say.
That makes a lot of sense, Nate.
Yeah,
I agree strongly with your observations, especially the one where, yes, you can train them in-house and you might even succeed very well at doing that, but eventually you still have to pay them market after
that's
that
right.
because there's no free lunch that way. What I'm seeing, Nate, is I see for the first time that engineering has split into two categories. One of them is, your engineers who use AI to do their coding and to do their work, and they're, using Claude Code or Copilot or Cursor or Vercel, one of these.
Yep.
um,
Yep.
that is now very baseline engineering. That is
Yep.
almost expected. There is, that in itself does not command any salary change or increase. In fact, I feel with so many tech layoffs, that category of engineering has may or may not be commanding as much anymore. Yet it's a baseline that they operate differently. And then
Agreed. Yep.
the new category in engineering, which is who are the engineers who are building your core product, as you said,
Yep.
and
Yep.
who are building the IP of your company, and hence your company is going to be worth a lot more, and hence those engineers command just a very different level of salary, and it's potentially possible you're competing directly with like the Anthropic or whoever is some of the strongest infrastructure and LLM companies out there.
Hmm.
So I think those engineers do command like a very different salary, and across the board, it's base and equity, and it's at that point not just about compensation. It then also starts tying back to mission, and
Hmm.
who can
Yeah.
you motivate with your mission and your values, and are there engineers who are very interested in AI video versus AI in compensation versus AI
Yep.
in email, or whatever else is getting produced out there. So I think I'm seeing that distinct shift in engineering as like regular, and then really some of the hottest forward deployed engineering type of roles.
That's right. Yep. I 100% agree with that. And I will also say, I think on the AI skill set bit, I think what I'm observing is something that we've seen in other areas, like the big data trend, where big data was the thing. It's all anyone could talk about for what, 2 or 3 years. And then it stopped being anything anyone talked about ever. Not because big data isn't important and it hasn't dramatically changed how businesses do work.
Yeah.
It becomes table stakes. It becomes an intrinsic competency as opposed to something that's new and interesting. I personally think that AI is going that route, where it will not be a question of should this person have an AI skill set. It's, well, why don't you? Does that
Yes.
make sense? And because to me, it feels like it feels to me like a paradigm shift in the tool use that we have. And the key thing of it is folks who use it well and have experience with it versus folks that are relying on it. And that's where I will say there is no replacement for core software engineering skill sets. In my opinion, right now, folks, the first group you mentioned that are using AI, what it does is I think it's a force multiplier. It's a decision support system. It's a speed enhancer in terms of how you do things faster to deliver higher quality. It can also be a great way to deliver bad code fast, right? And
Yeah,
that's where having those core competencies is so important. And that's where, to me, same thing with big data, right? Back in the day when we had the big data rollout, people still needed to know how to do Python. They still needed to know how to structure databases. They needed to know how to munge data, like, you know, that kind of thing, right? So what I'm getting at there is that yes, it is a paradigm shift on the who it's supporting and how we're using it. I think that's absolutely table stakes,
yeah,
right? The second fact there is about the product and what it is, what's a core comp, what you're building, and it's part of what you deliver as a business. That, to me, right now, I think of what we're seeing is just labor economics pay out, which I suspect over time, as this skill set becomes more prevalent, we will see salaries normalize. Right now, time, quality, money. Right, we're on the front of a hype cycle, or I guess maybe the mid part of a hype cycle. You're
yeah.
going to pay more to get top quality engineers who have this skill set if it's part of what you do build as a product, and that's just a fact of life. Or you're going to have to make trade-offs where you hire them, what level you hire them at, and all that. So absolutely, I think I agree with everything you said.
Yeah. And then outside of engineering, I'm seeing a new category emerge. It's not yet captured in market surveys, but I am seeing vibe coding as very real in multiple
Yeah.
data streams. One example I can give you is marketing and SEO. We all know content can be beautifully created by AI these days. So
Yep.
not about which of your SEO or content engineers or marketing people can write. It's about, which one of those can figure out, to write AI, increase their productivity, and still rank in all the SEO and all the AI
Yep.
machines. And that is not an easy skill set. It's not just about creating articles and publishing them. So we are seeing more and more of that. Similarly, on the sales side, I think there is appreciation with some companies, maybe more on the startup and tech companies, where the salespeople can create some prototypes, have very informed or very centered discussions with the customer, and then come back to engineering and say, hey, these types of things are really taking traction or picking up traction in the market. So I think we are seeing it go beyond, expand beyond engineering. But yeah, I
Yep. For
think
sure.
going to be a while before there's market data for it on what you pay this type of marketer or this type of salesperson. So I'll be interested to see, when the market surveys catch up on some of these things.
100%. I agree.
Nate would love to talk a bit about geo differentials. You mentioned, you've seen that in a lot of your customers. It's become a very hot topic since after COVID.
Yep.
Talk to me about, what are geo differentials, and what trends are you seeing in the market?
Yeah. So geo differentials are, I guess, at face value, like the short and sweet of it would be, is the difference between what is typical and or acceptable in pay between different areas, different locations in the world, right? That could be some places in the same country,
Yes.
right? So for the US, that means the difference between San Francisco and New York City. The difference between Atlanta and New York City might be very different, right? And there are also things to consider, like what's local norm, right? So, for example, I'll throw out this is a gross simplification, but for example, in Singapore, bonuses are much more common than they might be in other countries, and it
Yeah.
might be a geographic difference, not just on the factor we use to pay people, but it may also be how they're paid, what their pay mix is, and that sort of thing, right? So, in short, what I would use here as an example would be to say, hey, how does your company think about talent? And to me, that's going to be the core piece that drives almost every compensation discussion. And I know that's not a lot of fun, but I will say, as a person that sells compensation for a living, programs and software, I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to
Yeah.
is that, like, everything starts with talent strategy. Compensation is an outcome. So what I think about for talent, and geographic differences here, what we saw with COVID, is that everyone went out, right? And they went out of office. And for the most part, in most countries, people didn't work in the office for sometimes an extended amount of time. In some places, that hasn't changed a lot. And I know there's the return to office. And I'm not advocating for or against being in offices, right? Because I think there are benefits to both. But I'll also say that people have a certain expectation,
Yes.
right? And where you have an office, if someone needs to be in the office, if they are tied to that location, I strongly advocate for having location-based pay. That could be as simple as saying we're going to take the U.S. national average, depending on how, I'm U.S. as an example, and we're going to modify that by a certain percentage. It's going to be somewhere between 10 and 20% for places like New York City. Maybe it's 20% or more, 30%, depending on the skill set, in San Francisco. Maybe in Denver, it's plus 5%, right? I'm these are relatively, I say, directional estimates. I'm not a database of
Yeah,
geodiffs.
yeah, yeah.
But what I will say is that you want to take that into account. But if your employees could be anywhere and your team members can work in any place, they can work from home, you name it, and they're not tied to an office, that reality is still there. And
Yes,
that's where it comes back to me, is the same thing about my conversation about Singapore is, am I honoring the local practice? Am I being competitive? And what can I afford? Or am I honoring the company practice, right? Because there's a cultural difference there we might want to consider. And am I still competitive? Because if the company practices we don't pay bonuses, and you're not paying bonuses in a country that normally does, or you're, in San Francisco, for example, the cost of living is significantly higher than the cost of living in Atlanta. What you're saying is I'm making trade-offs. If you're not paying a salary differential in San Francisco, but your salary range is plus or minus 20%, you may still be able to hire people in San Francisco. But the key question there is if you could hire anywhere, unless that talent is
are you?
better for whatever,
Yeah,
why
yeah,
would you,
yeah.
right? And
Yes,
that's really what it comes down to is it's back to talent strategy, which is, hey, do I want to hire engineers in a higher expensive place? If the answer is yes, because there's a pocket of AI software developers, or,
yeah,
and I'll say hands down, the Bay Area in the United States is probably one of, if not the best place in the world to hire software engineers for availability, time, quality, money, right? There are more people there. You can hire them faster, right? And there's a depth of experience there for decades, right? It's going to cost you. And because of that, they also have a cost of living. This is the piece that a lot of folks forget. Stock options don't pay rent. Bonuses don't pay rent until next year, right? And that's where the important thing is base salaries matter. And what you're doing here is saying, if I could hire anywhere, would I hire in New York City? If the answer is yes, or I have to hire in New York City because that's where our office is, you should somehow compete with New York City pay. Otherwise, you're going to hire lower quality talent
exactly.
or lower level roles, and you're going to be constricted. However, if you don't have to hire in those places, you can make the decision to say we are not going to offer geographic differentials if you're not in the office. We're going to offer US national, which means we're going to trade off some competitive pay for your ability to work from home in an unlimited fashion, right? And that to me is what I usually do with customers. I tell them is if you have offices that someone is tied to and they are required to be in that office for a certain amount of time, your pay absolutely should be tied to that local market some way, somehow. If you're all remote, then it's a question of how competitive do you want to be and where are you making trade-offs? You do not have to have salaries competitive in San Francisco if you don't want to hire anyone in San Francisco. And you can make that decision. But the key thing of that is what you can't do later is come back and say, hey, I tried to hire 5 engineers or who are product folks in San Francisco and I couldn't afford them. Our pay data is wrong.
Yeah,
No, we made a decision and or, right, we're using pay data that is correct, but it's not relevant. It's not competitive. And that's really what it comes down to is what talent problems are you solving? What investments can you make? And the short of it for me is I like to have salary ranges and I like to start off with the assumption we're going to have one salary range for the entire country, no matter what country it is. Then you think about how would that play out? Are you hiring people in San Francisco, New York, Seattle? Okay, you need two salary ranges. You need a premium and you need a non-premium, whatever it is, tier
yeah,
one, tier two.
yeah.
Hey, we need to save money because we can hire people in lower cost markets. And this is no offense to anybody who's in Birmingham, Alabama, but Birmingham, Alabama has a much lower cost of living, right, than maybe New York City would. And as a result, typically you're going to have lower pay, right? This is the last part, and this is the part that has changed a lot since COVID. Cost of living is not cost of wages. And this is a conversation I have so many times with
I
so
know.
many
I
customers.
think the
Yep.
most confusing place for that is Los Angeles. And I get the question all
Yeah.
the time on why
Yeah.
LA is paid like lower than SF. And uh,
Yep.
I think there are very like confusing examples of that one, but I 100% agree on it. Nathan, would love to hear a bit from you on AI in compensation. What are some applications you are seeing? I'd love to get your thoughts. I'm happy to share my observations as well, but we'll have you go first.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so this one is one I'll say I have a slightly different opinion that might be controversial, right? I'm not sold on AI, not because I don't think the potential of AI is extraordinary, but because I feel like the potential of AI has not yet been realized. And that's where I keep in my head, I keep making this comparison to big data. I also make the comparison to the digital marketing revolution, which some folks listening to this may not even realize was a thing at one point. The way that marketing has changed in our lifetime is dramatically different. The reason I say that is because I don't think AI is a new tool. I don't think AI is um, nor do I think it's a panacea that's going to solve all of our problems and no one's going to have to work anymore, right? What I think is actually going to happen is right now we are riding a wave. It's a hype cycle wave and it is peaked, right? There are so many things at stake with AI being correct and right in the future that it has to be, or there's a lot of investments that are going to go poorly, right? That being said, can I go into AI right now, take everything that I know, document it, and then turn it into me to go do my work?
You
Absolutely
will.
not. What's that? I wish, right? Yeah,
But
exactly. But that's not going to happen. Nor would I say right now, if it did, would you even want that, right? And that's the part. What I will say is, I think the jury's still out on what the actual impact of AI is going to be. But I don't see it as a new technology. I see it as a paradigm shift. I think it's something where this is just how it is now. The same thing is right now we're not using. I'll think of it. It's not a faster horse. It's a car. It's going to change the way we move, the way
yeah,
we do. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah. And that's where, to me, in compensation, to be more specific about your question, I think it's a lot of different places. What I'm seeing is that there's a lot of traction that has already been generated around things that are qualitative. So, generating and validating job descriptions, reviewing job descriptions, and making, I will call it, informed assessments about things like leveling, job matching. Those are all fantastic, right? The second place, which I did not expect, is AI has made me, for example, significantly better at Excel because what I can do is say, hey, this formula what does it do? Or, hey, I'm trying to do this thing where before I would set up three or four different tables and I've got this complicated nested if v lookup. And if you don't know what that is, you don't need to know, right? For not you, Amy, but I know you know, but I'm saying like people listening to this. But what I will say there is, oh, there's a formula that I didn't know about that just does that. For example, X lookups. I knew when they came out, but I'm like, oh, I don't need index matches or V lookups. This is way better. I got that from AI, and it's like, hey, and it said like, hey, you're behind the curve. This came out 3 years ago, and I'm like, but I will say from a perspective though, I'm like, that's fantastic, right? An old dog learned a new trick, right?
correct.
That
You're
being
not
said,
trying to be an expert or pro level at Excel. You're trying to reward your talent effectively and make sure
correct.
you stay with the company and companies in budget. So your whole goal is very different than becoming pro level at Excel. Now I
That's
think
right.
we all have ended up there, but oh well.
Absolutely. And that's the part where I will say is that AI is fantastic in that sense because what it does is if you know what you're doing, if you have the functional knowledge, you can get there so much faster and with higher accuracy, and you can validate what you've done. And it's fantastic, right? It is a force multiplier, whatever you want to call it. It is a different kind of fuel, right? It's great. However, I've also seen a lot of AI stuff that, for example, we may come into a customer that has built their program with AI, right? And I get in there, and this is where what happens is if you don't know what you're doing, you don't have that functional knowledge, you can actually get to a way worse answer way faster and have no idea how or why.
AI will be very confident about it.
Oh
That
yeah,
is my high confidence level. Here are like the 50 reasons why this is the correct answer, and here's your wrong answer.
that's right. Yeah.
I
It,
find debugging AI one of the hardest things ever. And
yeah.
sometimes I look at the answer and I'm like, am I crazy or is this a wrong answer? It's just very tough to figure that out.
Absolutely. And I've had this issue a number of times where I have to just actually just type in, which is crazy to say to a system, you are absolutely wrong here. What you said does not make sense, right?
And then AI will be like, oh, of course, I'm so wrong. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah.
wrong. I'm like, if you knew you're really wrong, then why give me that crap answer?
Yeah. And that's the key thing to keep in mind is that AI, a lot of times people forget, at least the way that a lot of the LLMs work, is they're a reflection of what your inputs are. They're drawing on information that may or may not be correct because it's going to be sourced from a variety of different sources. It's not as simple as a mathematical routine where it's going 1 + 1 = 2. It's going and saying, hey, what do 80% of the people on Reddit say about 1 + 1 equals?
I know you are
And then
right.
it'll pull, hey, well, I found 20 articles and they may or may not be written by internet trolls and they say that 1 + 1 = 3, right? And the next thing you know, it's like, no, I am certain 1 + 1 is equal 3, right? That being said, though, if you have that functional knowledge, and this is the part I'll say, this is going to be a little Tennessee of me to say this, but I'll say that data is one thing, wisdom is another. Knowing that tomatoes are fruit is data, right? Knowing that tomatoes make a really crappy fruit salad is wisdom, right? And I think with AI, you can get as much data as you want, or not data, almost data. But if you have the wisdom and you have the ability to use it and the functional knowledge, I think AI is a game changer. And that's where, to me, in compensation, what I'm seeing is qualitative input has been fantastic. I'm also starting to see things like decision support, right? Hey, what is the most typical salary for this job? What is the expected variability? How are the variability pieces explained? There's all these things that certain companies are doing, which is fantastic. And they're things that used to be a really complicated set of algorithms, multiple tables. You could not do this in Excel. And if you did, it was a really, really convoluted Excel file, which might have been fun to build, but probably a bad idea to apply, right? So you pull that back, and AI changes that because it can do really complicated calculations. The issue is it's very difficult to check your work. So if you don't know what you're doing, you can get to a bad result faster.
It
Yeah.
is. Nate, that is super helpful. My observations are similar. There are certain use cases, Nate, that I'm seeing where AI is already effective. Of course, you need your checks and balances, and you need to know what you're doing, but it can take you out of Excel work. I'll give you one example, which is budget building.
Yeah.
So if you have to
Yeah.
build salary budgets or let's say bonus budgets for the upcoming cycle, we've implemented, our AI comp agent, which can effectively do that. So our customers are able to, layer in very complex things like, hey, give 3% increase for United States and, 6% for Mexico and 9% for India.
Yep.
Then on top of it, everyone hired in Q4, exclude them from the analysis. And then everyone
Yep.
hired in 2025, give them, prorations of this type. And oh, by the way, I think tech should be funded higher, so give them 0.5% higher. And then while you do that, also build a promotion budget that should only be our eligible population and build only for like 10% of the eligible population and, just multivariant things. And you give all of that to AI and, it's able to produce budgets very effectively. Before this, I think before AI, for most of our customers, it was a very manual exercise. HR would, do one iteration in Excel, then finance would get feedback. We can't afford this, go down. And so
Yep.
ended up being like 23 versions of Excel files and,
Yep.
many more back and forth and variations. So I think where it is Excel, but you still need to kind of know what you're doing.
Yep.
AI is getting pretty good at it.
Yep.
One other place where I'm seeing, good opportunity and application is new hire offers. So previously, for customers, new hire offers used to be, let me look at my internal data, let me look at the salary ranges, also let me look at market data, and then let me make a decision on how much should I pay this marketing manager. So it
Yep.
used to be reviewing like 3 or 4 sources of data, then the candidate's
Yep.
resume. Now, if you give all of that to, your AI or, your version, it can do a pretty good analysis on, hey, we've looked at everything. Your internal incumbents are here. If this candidate has 5 years of experience, there's a pretty good chance that they can, go here. Again, I
Yep.
we are at
Agreed.
the very
Yep.
beginning. We are at the very tip of the iceberg. I do think it can be a far more powerful application. But very early, we are seeing like some places where AI is able to take on the manual work. But again, someone has to configure that AI, or you have to have a platform, and then I think you're able to see this. But
Yep.
yeah, I think just in our function in general, in human resources and finance, the amount of spreadsheets and the amount of
Yep.
manual work that goes on each time, because a company is like, I created my own process and we
Yep.
are so unique and this is the only thing that works for us. Uh,
Yep.
because of that, I think the opportunity that is in front of us is just massive.
Yep. Can I share two tactics that I really love? This is not very strategic, but they're two
I
things
love,
okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
This is
perfect.
very tactical, but there's one that I found that I really love, and it's one I would say is what I call a test case, which is, hey, I've got an anonymous set of data from a customer or a set of customers, whatever I'm looking at, and I want to know, are there any gaps in their pay practices that may be explained through, we'll call it not the best practices. So are there any things in here that are not leading to pay equity and or could be compliance risks, right? Would I want to trust the AI tool to do a pay equity study for me and figure out if I have risk or not and how much? No. But what it is great at doing is saying you load that anonymous data and you say, hey, tell me, are there any trends here? Or it can run a very fast regression. It can do correlation coefficients. It can pull multivariate analysis. Hey, check, let's control for age, level, location, job code, all of that. And I will say it will tell you like, hey, very quickly, like, hey, there, this is here, this is that, this is that, which I really love. Not that I would say, hey, I'm going to do a pay equity analysis in AI yet, but what I would do is say, should we go do a pay equity analysis and invest here, right? And that to me is a really great way to get really good a good insight fast, just to inform should we take on a bigger project. The second one I really love, and that's an example. It could be how's our pay for performance. It could be whatever you want to do, right? There's a number of use cases that are really nice. The second thing I really love it for is that what I used to do is we would have an intern or someone who would go out and say, "Hey, now this is not a joke. We've had two different interns who've done this, and we have a customer that would say, "Hey, we want to do not a peer group. I want to go and pull data from this list of 5 companies and see how they pay. You
Oh,
and I both know okay, it's going to be self-reported. I'm going to go find it from available internet resources. It should we be using it? Maybe not, right? It depending on what industry and country they're in, there may be some antitrust discussions to have, right? Not a lawyer, as a note, but what I will say is that what we would do is go pull that, and you look at places like Glassdoor, Salary.com, Level FYI, Reddit, you name it. AI is fantastic at doing this work now. And what I'll do is give it a list of 10 companies or give it a company that I am working with and say, pull me a list of their competitors. Then go find any and all available data resources you can about pay practices that are publicly available for that company and link to me your sources. That is a fantastic resource to go and pull because that might take an intern days. It would take me weeks, right? I can do that now in 30 minutes and come back to the customer. Here's an export. This is not verifiable. You should not use this as salary bands, but it does give you a good over
are
under.
looking at it, and your hiring managers are looking at it. Maybe a
That's
recruiter is
right.
looking at it.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
Nate, I'm so with you on this one. At a conference past summer, I spoke about, letting ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity scrape data and give you, some of the data when you enter a market. And I got a lot of
Yep.
surprised looks from the, audience. But I stand by that. I think compared to a year ago, even the power of some of these models and the ability to synthesize and
Yeah.
the quality of data, it has become better and better. I would not use it to set my entire salary range, but if I am going out there in a new country and it's just one job and a sales job, and I'm not
Yeah.
in a place to purchase an entire country survey for that, I would absolutely, use it as a reasonable
Yeah.
start point. And
Yeah.
that's a very good application, Nate. And that's a very interesting one of, can you combine their competitors and try? I have to try that one out and report back to you.
I've loved it. And hey, one more for you. I know we're probably coming up on time here, but this is one I will say. I love this as a bonus tip. I love this one too, which is, hey, what am I missing? Are there any trends in this data? For example, these salary bands. Are there any things in here that I had missed? And that's where to me it's also really great because as a human, right, I'm going to only see what I see. I have my models, I have things I think through, I have my habits, right? What I've actually found that AI is fantastic for is say, hey, run through a comp cycle, for example. Is there anyone in here whose increase is disproportionate to their performance and their comp ratio? And it will go and find that to say, hey, this leader, the original increase here might have been 5%. They moved it down to 2%, 2.5%. And now we may see this is a top performer who's been here for 5 years,
Yeah.
right? They did it to hit a budget number, most likely,
Yes,
you know what
yes,
I mean? And that's a really great place to say, what have I missed? What have I not seen out from a discovery perspective? They can help you know what you don't know. You just have to be careful and be critical of it. But I also say it's been fantastic for that around like, tell me something I don't know about this data set. Tell me something I don't know about this. Midpoint progressions, by the way, for this job are all 5%. That might be literally what the market data says. It may not be what you should be doing,
correct.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Correct. That's fantastic, Nate. This was
Yeah,
really, really helpful. Amazing tips on AI, on salary ranges, and everything else. I've really enjoyed our conversation, Nate. Thank you so much for taking time on a lovely
absolutely.
sunny over here, sunny Friday morning, and riffing it with me. And for everyone, thank you so much for listening. And thanks again.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you. Appreciate you.